So I've been looking at other YouTubers and looking at the intros they do, and like there's this guy one topic who goes, "Hello, my beardos and weirdos," and all these sorts of things. And I was kind of like, "Oh, we need one of those for tech bugs and rock and roll." And I was kind of like, "Hello, my techers, buggers." Oh wait. So it would work really well, apart from that one word, which will probably get us marked as not safe for work on Spotify.
But weirdos definitely describes the audience, doesn't it?
I mean, I think it does. Hello, everybody. Hello, chat. Hello, Christopher and Shadow. It's not Dylan this week. Dylan is on an aeroplane. And so I have Hannes Lowette,
yes.
Lowette, who has graciously agreed to join me and step in for Dylan and talk about, whatever comes up. And anything else. So yes, say hi, Hannes.
Hi. Should I introduce myself?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm Hannes. I'm a fellow linebreaker to Randall and Dylan. We hang out a lot throughout the year in different countries all over the world. I have a .NET background. I build guitars for a hobby, not the one behind me that was built by Ken Parker, who is amazing. And yeah, I just love general nerdy stuff, which brings me to this podcast, I guess.
Yay, welcome. So yeah, it's because we've had Kevlin on, I think, a couple of times, and we've had Eli on a couple of times, and so we're sort of working through. It's difficult to get Heather on because it's like 9 o'clock in the morning where Heather lives. So, but yeah, we will eventually go through everybody, and you'll all get a go. So yes, what's you looked through the Trello that we have of things that we could talk about, and you went, "Oh, I want to talk about that Merchants 2 table. What's that about?"
Oh, Merchants 2. I think the title of the article is something like the worst and most beautiful mess I've ever seen in code, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's somebody telling a story about a code base, and for me it hit a couple of things that I have experienced. Now the gist of the system is basically they ran out of columns. Like there's an upper limit to how many columns you can have in a SQL Server database, and they basically ran into that limit on the merchants table, forcing them to make a Merchants 2 table to have additional columns in the Merchants table.
Yeah.
And at the time, that limit was like 1,024 columns. So you can imagine like the size of that table. But there was different stuff going on in that database as well. Like the sequence key table. I think that is fun. And it's a table with a single column, with a single row, where they just generate all of their identifiers.
Yes.
And I've once done something not quite unlike that. Basically working in a database engine that was not SQL Server and that did not have something like row versions. We basically had a sequence. No, it was Firebird, actually, the open source version of what Interbase used to be. Yeah. And that supported something like sequences or generators. I don't remember what they were called. And we basically did one that was basically our idea of row version, because we had to synchronize between different databases, and that was our way of figuring out which records had been touched and which ones had it. It involved a lot of triggers.
Yes. But no, there were databases that I've used. I can't remember which ones, but I'm pretty sure one of them was Oracle, where it didn't have the idea, because the first database I ever used was Infomix. And that's, I think you said that you used the serial attribute on a column, and it became an auto-incrementing, unique, what do they call it, monotonically increasing column. And that worked really nicely. You just went, there's a table, and every time you insert something into it, the next number goes in there. And then you go and you work on an Oracle system. You're like, so how do you do the same thing in there? And they say, well, you create a sequence, which is a database level object, and then you reference that sequence from your table creation, but in a kind of default value equals select next from sequence, which returns the next number and increments it internally and stuff. And I remember just
way of doing things.
This is stupid. Would you do this? And apparently the killer feature of it was like this sequence key thing was doing in the merchants database, was that you could share the same sequence across multiple tables, which does actually make sense if you've got one of those schema where you're using like an ORM, and bear in mind that most people who were using Oracle were using Java and Hibernate, and you have in your code, you've got sort of a customer and an employee class or something, and they are basically, they derive from person. And in the database, they're represented as a customers table and a people table, or an employees table, but they have a unique identifier between them. So yeah. And then in the ORM, you can go get the people where the ID is this, and it will return you an employee or a manager depending on which table it found it in. So that is actually quite clever. But I don't think that's why this merchant's database was doing it.
I think that idea of not sharing the same unique identifier between different types of entities in your database isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I can't really explain why, because I don't see any ways that in my code it would be a huge conflict if I have a customer with ID X and I also have an order with ID X.
Yeah.
But just knowing that a certain identifier only can mean one thing in my database, it kind of makes sense. And it's why maybe we use GUIDs, but then the problem is that GUIDs aren't sequential. So we are going to get sequential GUIDs in .NET 9, I think.
Yes, we're getting UUID 7, where the first 12 bytes, I think it is a based on the timestamp.
To the millisecond or
nanosecond, I think.
To the
it might just be millisecond, but I think it's nanosecond. But it's also weird, and it's got a bit in the middle that tells you that it's a UUID 7, which is always the same. There's like 6 bits or something that are always set the same. It is, and that's the other thing with the way the UUID things are done. It's sub-byte alignment on things that matter, which is just terrible. Yeah. Fun. You have to do bit shift so that you can compare things to integers. So yeah, Eli's in the chat. Hello, Eli. Good to see you.
Hello.
I'm doing that thing where I've shared my entire screen over here, and I can see and I'm trying to work out why I can't move my cursor off the edge of the window, and it's because it's not there. It's 3:04 in the morning in your time zone. So that's 3:04 tomorrow morning, then, I assume. So that's like New Zealand or somewhere. Asia. Wow. Well done for staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning to watch this. Just, I am truly honored. But no, the thing with, we've run out of columns on the merchants table. Let's just add a merchants 2 table with more columns. And it's like, tell me you don't know how to do like an attributes table or a tags table without telling me you don't know how to do a tags table,
or bit flags or whatever.
Just so many things. I remember way back in the Infomix days when we had serial columns. We had a bunch of, I worked at a place that trained people in Infomix programming and then sent you out on contract for 3 years and made a crap load of money off you. And then you can either stay with them or go off and go freelance, or do what I did, which was go back in-house and train the next generation of people. We had noticed with people going off and doing this contract and that contract that all applications in those days were basically the same. They were CRUD applications. They all used query by example. The database structures were always very similar. And we identified a kind of series of problems that we could actually automate solving. And we created a whole
You
package
built a
called...
framework, didn't you?
No, we built a code generator. We built a thing called Informate, where you could essentially design the database and then generate an application from it, and then make little tweaks in a configuration database to
Like
how
Oracle
it generated the
Forms
code and
with
everything. That sort of, yeah, like auto forms. And it was very successful. One of the things we built into it was a thing. There was 2 tables called lookup and lookup type. And it was essentially, it was for the drop downs. But then we had someone said, "Oh, we want that, but we also want to attach a different value to the tag to the lookup thing on each row as well." And so then that became the attributes table, and that then morphed into I wrote. It was a framework for to SQL Windows, but it was all based on the same kind of database structure and so forth. And then that was used to build a membership management system, and it just went nuts because we were selling this to like the NSPCC, I think, had it, the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, just, you know, all the professional bodies and charities and all these sorts of things. And their attributes tables got really, really, really big, and the queries, if they were querying on like 6 or 7 of them, that was 6 or 7 joins to the same table, which was not ideal. And so it's starting to slow down, and we were actually looking at, can we dynamically change the table structure or something? And then actually after I left the company, SQL Server introduced sparse column tables, where, yeah, you can have like 1,000 columns, but they're all named different things. It's kind of like Azure table storage inside SQL Server. So I hope that whoever created the merchants and merchants 2 tables is now using sparse columns to achieve the same result. So yes.
But some of the conclusions in that story, because they also talk about the external consultants team that is trying to rebuild the database, and the 5-year migration project that came with it and whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I recognize that. It's like we quick and dirty add a few columns to that table because we need to ship something, and then the next time we have the discussion, say, we did it like that last time, so let's do it again. And that's how the whole stuff escalates. And it's basically the whole technical debt discussion all over again. It's like at some point you're gonna have to repay your debt, and I think
I mean,
they were bankrupt.
They were
at
bankrupt.
That time.
But sometimes they have to get to the point of bankruptcy to get that push over into building the new system. And yeah, I mean, stuff was just built like this. Back in those days, I got contracted for 6 weeks to go and write some reports for a company somewhere in the north of England when I was 19, I think. And I turned up, and they basically went, "Here's the specs for all the reports." And it was kind of like, so you want to select star from table and then format it as CSV and send it to the printer, or format it in rows and send it to the printer? And they said yes. And I thought, well, I could do that manually, or I could write a code generator in Corn Shell that does it for me and finish them all on the 2nd day that I was there. And so they said, "Thank you very much, you can go now." And I went back down to Hastings, and they went, "Why are you back?" And I went, "I did it." And they went, "It was supposed to take 6 weeks." And I was like, "Yeah, I did it though." And they were really cross because that was 6 weeks of money that they missed out on.
That they then weren't able to invoice. Yeah. Should have been, that's one of those rare occasions where it probably should have been a fixed price project.
Absolutely. Yes. Always fixed price. So Eli says, "At my new job, there used to be a whole nautical theme to the way they talked about work. And one remnant of that is that resolving technical debt is called deck scrubbing." That's
nice.
Deck scrubbing's bad though, isn't it? I don't want you doing deck scrubbing on the, I mean, I
doesn't
suppose
sound fun at all.
Although at least you're outside in the fresh air and stuff. There are worse places to be working on ships. So yeah, no, actually, deck scrubbing is quite a positive thing. but no, because I wanted to. There's a couple of things that I've been going about. And the first one, I want to get this off my chest just before we go any further, is
Tell us, Mark, what is bothering you?
Developer workstations. And so throughout my entire life, developer workstations, the things that I basically sit at and use all day in order to add what little value I can to the world, they just never get it right. Well, no, actually, sometimes they do get it right, and I will talk about that. But in the old days, it was we are going to give the developers the same spec of machine that we give everybody else so that they can see what it's like to run the software. And you have to try and explain to the person with the Dell account manager who needs help to kind of defragment their hard disk that you are not running the software that everybody else is running. You are debugging the software that everybody else is running. And there are these things called symbol files, and they take up a lot of memory. And you have one of the slowest, arsiest pieces of software, because Visual Studio, like 2012 and whatever they were, it was
It's still
pig.
bad.
And then they're kind of like going, why is everything taking so long? And you're kind of like, because compiling and running my software takes 10 minutes. Literally every time I make a change and press F5, I just go outside and touch some grass. So yes, and now...
But you're never back in 10 minutes, are you?
No, that's the thing. And you've lost your flow, and you go off and you chat to somebody else, or you sort of start reading something on the internet and go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. You just don't come back. So that was bad enough. But now I keep working at places where they're using some god-awful Citrix system to log you into a remote desktop, which is the same remote desktop that every other person in the company has.
Oh, so you don't get more CPU or
no. You kind of do, because if you check the specs on those, they've got like 8 gigs of RAM, maybe 16 if it's sort of really up to date. And then from there, you have to connect to a developer VM using remote desktop, which is like somewhere inside an Azure data center, which means it can be on the same VNet as all the developer and UAT and test kind of app services and everything else. And then that thing has got 64 gigs of RAM, still only 4 cores though. So like 1% of a Xeon processor, or however many of those they've got now. And you can't install anything on it. The only way you can install things on it is using Chocolatey. They're on Chocolatey 1.1, and Chocolatey itself is just about to release 3.0. They've hamstrung the command line Chocolatey, so you have to use Chocolatey GUI, which complains about a system.object array every time it's looking for a version, which you suspect is that either the private repository that they're running is doing something very, very wrong, or it's just incompatible with this old and unsupported version of Chocolatey. And I just don't, it's kind of, or, you know, all those Azure services, the container apps and the app services and the blob storage and the Cosmos DB and everything, you can make them available on the public internet and then have them behind a firewall with IP allow listing, and that's...
Or even a VPN tunnel.
Or even a VPN tunnel, you know, just do the VPN. So I can, you know, when I was working for David's company, that was what we had. We had a VPN tunnel. If you were connected to the VPN, you could see all the portal stuff in Azure. If you weren't, you couldn't. And that's secure. And the thing is, I think that's actually, it's more secure, because if you give me a developer VM which is locked down, and I want a piece of software and I need that piece of software, or in particular, I need that Vim plugin because I can't use editors without Vim plugins because I'm just typing random characters all over the place after pressing escape. I will find a way to install it. You will not stop me from installing something if I really need it. Okay, I'm gonna do it. So stop trying, and just either give me one of those VMs and just give me install permission. Just I should be administrator,
like local admin
on my
on that
machine.
machine.
Yeah, local admin, and then you can have. There are those weird kind of software audit things that just run constantly in the background, and then if you identify that I've installed something dodgy, you can kind of just uninstall it again. It's kind of forgiveness rather than permission. Instead of going, oh, I need Wireshark, and they go off and they say, oh, he says he needs Wireshark. What's Wireshark? And they found one article that goes, it's a tool that hackers use. And they're like, no, you can't have Wireshark. And I'm kind of like, right, well, I can't profile your network traffic. So we're kind of at an impasse.
And anyway, you should only have access to dev environment or UAT at most. You shouldn't have full access to production to do your job anyway. No, unless you're actually troubleshooting something that went wrong.
Nobody should have access to production or any system that contains even anonymized production data. I know sort of places where UAT is updated overnight every night, and it anonymizes the current production database with random names and addresses and all that, and then that becomes UAT for the next day. It's actually, that's really cool, because if doing something with a particular data item caused an exception, you can just happily debug it in UAT the next day. But dev, and things like test key vaults and blob storages and all this sort of thing, I just firewall it. And as Eli has said, it's more secure because it actually draws the security boundary you want instead of maximum security all the time. No, you can't have Spotify. Yes, exactly. And
devs are creative. They're going to find a way around it. So they'll probably clone the repos on their own device, which is then again a security risk or whatever. But
I love the places where it's they've locked down, so you can't access Dropbox or Gmail or Outlook or any of the things that you might use to kind of send yourself sensitive data, except GitHub. You can access GitHub, and if you're running an on-premise GitLab or GitHub Enterprise or whatever. But no, I've never used that. But honestly, if your developer can't figure out the way to get around your group policy and install a piece of software that they need, you should fire them, because there are better developers out there who would absolutely be able to just make an end run around your stupid chocolatey gooey install. Anyway,
and the issue is, the reason that we find ways around all of that is just because we want to do our job more efficiently. It's not even because we're trying to circumvent something that you don't want us to do. You want us to do our job.
Yeah,
you're just making it hard for us to do. I've had a customer at one time where they did the same thing. They gave everybody the same laptop as everybody else, even the developers, which meant at the time, I think this was around the time that was Windows 7 was the current OS, but we were still on XP. We were running an old version of Visual Studio, but the thing had so many group policies that booting your laptop on that slow hardware and getting into Visual Studio took 25 minutes. And on top of that, they had a policy that laptops could not be left on overnight. We all tried. I mean, we left on our laptops all week. But as soon as somebody of the cleaning crew saw that a laptop wasn't powered off, they would just hold down the button and hard turn it off for you.
I thought you meant like a group policy that turned the machines off, but no, they just
no.
Like the cleaning staff
just press the buttons. So when you came in the morning and the cleaning crew, they didn't turn them off every day, but when they did that area of the building, they would turn off your machine. So when you came in the morning, it's like, oh, the next 25 minutes, I'm doing nothing. So you would go into the break room and have a conversation with everybody who was,
Also
facing the
turning on
same
their
problem.
machines.
Obviously, you didn't get back within 25 minutes. It would be 35 minutes or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's like such a waste of time. And I've never understood why companies skimp on things like hardware. Like give your developers, even if you give them like a fully spec'd MacBook Pro, let's say you
Yeah.
throw 5K at a dev machine and you write that off over 3 years. It's
Yes.
peanuts compared to the wage that you're paying these people over the course of that time.
Yeah.
Because developers are expensive.
It really is. I actually, at the advice and behest of my then girlfriend and then wife and now ex-wife, I was complaining that the machine I had at home, which I was starting to bring work home so I could do it on my own PC because it was faster, which gives you a rough idea. I did a time and motion study, and she went, okay, so time how long the loop takes. I don't think she called it the loop, but that inner loop, that compile, run, check something, stop, make a change, compile, run. How long does that loop take on your machine here that you're happy using, that you just spent like £2,500 on or whatever it was?
Yeah.
And then time the same thing on your work PC, and then count the number of times you do that every day and the dead time that you're getting there. And it's kind of like, well, I think I probably do that. I mean, let's say I do it 4 times an hour and it's 5 minutes. And then on this PC that I've got at home, it's 30 seconds. And so that's 20 minutes out of every hour. That's a third of my time spent waiting for something instead of like 2 minutes total out of every hour. And then you take the cost of employing you, which is not your salary. It's actually roughly double your salary because of office rent and insurances and all
and
that
benefits
sort of thing.
And employer taxes and whatever.
Exactly. And private health insurance. It's kind of like, right, so I'm getting paid this, which means it's costing you close to £100,000 a year to employ me and every single other one of these developers. And if we are spending a third of our time waiting for these broke-ass machines to compile and run, that is costing you £33,333 a year. And the PC that we want costs £2,500, including VAT. You're not even going to pay the VAT. And it was the one time in my life I actually won. And every single developer in the entire company, they introduced a new minimum spec for developers' machines, and it was updated regularly in consultation with the developers. And the hilarious thing was everybody else in the company kicked up a huge fuss that we had these, like, because they were black. This is when PCs were beige and they sat on your desk with the monitor on top of them, and ours were black and they would not fit on the desk. They were like Death Star workstations. And so, yeah, everybody else who wasn't a developer was like really, really jealous. And we're just going, haha, learn JavaScript.
Well, yeah, or whatever other programming language. But
any other programming language.
That's
really.
why I refuse to skimp on things like my home setup at my desk, like the cost of having a standing desk or a treadmill or I love that quote from Eli, by the way. But like a treadmill under my desk or whatever. I mean, if I'm dropping 10K on my home setup, which is a generous amount of money, you can get a decent chair, decent monitor, decent everything for around 10K. If you look at the price of what a plumber has in the back of his van to do his job, that's still peanuts. Like 10K is still peanuts. And it's literally the only tools we need to be productive.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that ever becomes a discussion, because it affects people's happiness in their job.
Yeah.
And I think we should conclude the rant there.
I think so. Because I
and
also
take
want
the
to talk
happiness aspect into the next topic, shouldn't we?
Yes, code reviews.
Code reviews.
So, because I got my code reviewed, I had one of those things where I spent ages and ages just building a thing that didn't exist into existence, and so, and it was kind of the minimum viable product. And it's not production code; it's a simulator of an external service that we can use in testing, because the actual test system that the service provider offer is rubbish, and so I built one that we could control. But yeah, there was no point doing little PRs and little PRs and little PRs, because it's kind of like, this doesn't add any value. So I would every now and then make sure I'd merged main, but it was completely separate. So then I kind of went, oh, it's a PR, and it was like 450 files changed and 3,500 lines of code or whatever the hell it was. And so somebody actually took it on himself to go through the whole thing and review it. I think I ended up with like 60
You mean like asynchronously sit at their workstation without you looking at your code and adding comments to the GitHub or whatever you're using too?
Because this may sound like I'm like with the developer workstation thing, like I'm going to go code reviews. How you code review me? Do you know who I am?
Well, that too, but
no, I mean, there is the sort of thing of there are very few people who are senior to me, but there are an awful lot of people who are cleverer than me, and I've had code reviews from them, and I've learned things from it and all this sort of stuff. But no, the thing I wanted to call out from this particular experience was, there were 60 comments. I would say the majority of them were, why haven't you just deleted this commented out code, or do we really need this debug string here, and all these sorts of things? And they caught all of them. And then it was, why haven't you used this library or something? And it's kind of, well, I only want effectively one extension method, and I don't want to drag in 200 others and so forth. But this is the key point, is there were at least half a dozen comments that were, oh, that's really nice, or that's a good pattern, we should use this in more places in the code base. And so there was positive feedback in there as well, and the kind of, I didn't know you could do that, learn something every day. And it was just when you see 60 active comments, and you're kind of like, oh my god, I suck at everything, and then you go down, most of them are just typos.
Most of them are basically like, this doesn't matter, and some of them are positive.
But it's tempered with, I really like this. It's just, it's nice, it's lovely, it makes you smile, and it makes the whole process. And so I kind of, if people are out there doing code reviews on each other's code, every now and then just be nice, because it makes working through someone criticizing your code just a slightly less horrible experience. So what do you think of code reviews generally as a way of trying to monitor quality?
I love getting, I really love the idea of getting a second pair of eyes on a piece of code and learning from each other's experiences and insights and knowledge and whatever. I love that part of reviewing code. I thoroughly dislike the process of doing it asynchronously through a web interface. Because, I mean, your experience there is what every code review should be. It's like we learn from each other while we're doing it, and it should be overall a generally positive experience. And the end result should be better code. I mean, that's the whole gist of why we want code reviews. The way that a lot of companies do it, it comes from the open source world, right? Where we have to very defensively protect the quality of our main source code from whoever is going to contribute, who we may not know and not be in the same time zone as, and so on. And the fact that you have to click resolve on every comment sparks people to basically only flag the stuff that needs fixing. And inherently that makes it a very, very negative process.
It is,
And I prefer doing code reviews in a synchronous way by pair programming or mob programming, or like sitting at the same machine, or even with different machines through a online session, because we have things like live share now and so on.
Yeah.
I think working on the code together with someone is in general a more effective way and a more pleasurable way to get the same effects in your
Yes.
code.
Yeah. And I can sort of stand that when you're using like live share or code with me or something like that, where you have, because the problem I always had in the past is the Vim plugin, which I can't work without and most people can't work with. And then you're sort of like going, so we're supposed to pass the keyboard backwards and forwards. And also just, you know, with my various neurodivergences, physical proximity to the same person for that amount of time is like very uncomfortable. But doing it online now, it's a lot better. Although I'm still quite defensive of when people are, but why are you doing that way? And I'm just kind of like, because it's better. Because I haven't got time to explain to you why it's better. So yes, apparently I don't do pair
I
programming.
have the time nor the crayons to explain this to you.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I don't do pair programming. I do couple coding, which is the same, but it ends up in a huge fight, and one of you gets the mouse and the other one gets the keyboard.
Yeah.
Laughing. But no, it's thinking about the asynchronous process, because there are times when you just can't pair because you are sort of geographically in different time zones and things. But it's an idea that you could add to one of those things where you change the software that we're using to try and model more positive behavior. So imagine if, as you were adding your comment, you had a happy face and a straight face and a sad face. And if it was, you need to fix this, then it was a sad face. And if it was just an observation, then it was the straight face. And if it was oh, that's really good, I like what you've done there, then it was a happy face. And then as you're going through the comments, it changes what the button says. So for the things where you had to fix something, it's resolve. And for the thing where it was just an observation, you just go, yeah,
you don't need to press resolve. You can continue.
That's it. It's kind of, and then for the ones that are happy, there's a button that says, oh, thank you.
And that means we could apply social ratings to the quality of our code reviews again.
Yes. And you know, your end of year bonus, one of the
I was going to say the same thing.
KPIs for your end of year bonus is how many happy comments did you leave while you were doing code reviews? And then everyone will
one
be
manager will
showering
figure out how to
up
make
to
that
a maximum
your pay.
of
Yeah.
But you know, up to so like 100 positive comments over the course of a year. And that sort of maxes out as an extra bottle of what's the stuff that's not champagne? Prosecco in your annual Christmas holiday hamper. But yeah, that's what is going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot of chat happening. I'm reading up on it as well.
So yes, but no, an emergent property of a healthy engineering culture. I am noticing that my current gig, developer workstations aside, I'm really enjoying working with all the people. It's a company based up in Edinburgh, like boutique software
They're just
development.
drinking a lot of whiskey.
They rent you out an entire team for a year. But yeah, no, they are, because I've worked with places like that where they're just sort of like Donald Trump, they're not sending their best people. I don't know whether these people have sent their best people, but they've sent awesome people. I'm really enjoying working with them. And I'm not just saying that because I know some of them listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube. But no, they are really great. And particularly big shout out. I'm not going to name anybody, but yeah, big shout out to the positive code review person for making my day better yesterday. You're awesome.
Actually, I once spoke at a conference where somebody gave a talk about how to be better and get more positive code reviews, and they actually did a whole study about it. So go look up Dr. Michaela Greiler, who did research into doing better code reviews. The talk is probably out there somewhere, so you can probably find it on YouTube. But if you want to get better and more effective at doing like code reviews that don't leave behind the sour taste of the things we described in this conversation, that could be one of the talks that you should be looking into and research you should be looking into.
Put a link to her website in the chat if anybody wants to find that. Yes. What was I going to say? I was going to say something. It'll come back to me. So yes.
Yeah, Randall was faster than you, Eli.
Yeah. Oh, no. So one thing that I also noticed as I was going through this code review, probably because I was accepting it in a more positive light than I have done in the past, is if a lot of the comments in the code review are questions, why have you done this way? What they're actually saying is, would you please comment your goddamn code? And because if I'd put a comment in saying this may look weird, but this is why I'm doing it, or this is a nice hack and here's a link to the place I found out about it, or whatever, they wouldn't have had to leave that question. And so it's
it's a learning opportunity. You know something they don't, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And that also comes back to the merchants too story. They just didn't know a better way of doing it. They had to learn.
But my favorite, so outside of the that's nice and I like that and everything, my favorite comment, which would have had a sad, I think, if there'd been 5 and it was like a super grumpy face, they would probably have gone super grumpy face, is I use goto in my code. Only in 2 very specific circumstances, but I use goto. So those 2 circumstances are, I'm in a nested loop and I want to break out of one of the inner loops, and yes, nested loops bad and all that sort of thing, but at the same time, the code to process a 2-dimensional array with
it's going to be nested loops.
With SIMD, which is the only way to avoid nested loops, is going to be considerably more complicated to understand. The other is try methods. So try methods where you pass something in and it tries to do something, and if it does it successfully, it sets 1 or more out parameters and returns true, and if it can't do it, then it sets them to their default values and return false. And the default pattern that I see for doing that is right at the top of the method. They set those 2 parameters to their default value, and then at any point during so if I can pass this string into an integer, then do this, and if I can pass that bit, when you're doing like complex date passing with unsupported formats and all that sort of thing, like a weird duration format that starts with a P. So there's lots of points at which it could fail as you kind of pass an array of bytes in UTF-8, and so you want to set it at the top and you return false each time.
Return false.
That's it. I want to shortcut out. I don't want to set those 2 variables or those 3 variables if I'm returning true, because I'm going to set them to their default and then set them to the successful value and then return true. But I don't want to have to put every single fail thing in something that's passing 8 different bits of a string into every single time this equals default, that equals default, return false. So I put a fail label at the bottom of the method that sets the defaults and returns false. And I like that. I like that pattern. And if you look at the machine code that it generates, it with all the hoisting and everything, it does save you like probably 3 or 4 CPU cycles. And I come from there's some part of my brain that still thinks I'm targeting 286. But yes, the problem
CPUs are fast
is,
now, Randall.
Yeah,
They're fast.
I know they are, but you can still, all those cycles add up, especially in fintech. But no, there's a generation. I mean, there's like 2 generations now, because we've got the millennials and now we've got the Zoomers who are turning up and everything. There's a generation of programmers who grew up programming in Python and JavaScript and sort of the hardcore kiddies with the C++ and the Unreal Engine building their Fortnite mods and all this sort of thing. And they have never used a programming language like Fortran or BASIC, where the only way of doing flow control was GoTo. That was it. Fortran had no other way of doing that.
I've actually been thinking of this once, and I pitched the idea. We know that GoTo is also a conference brand, right?
Yeah.
And at some point they asked me, like, is there a party talk you can do? And I was thinking of kind of inspired by your worst programming language in the world, to figure out a programming language where the only keyword was GoTo.
Ooh.
And I think I can make that work, but it would be horrible, and that would kind of be the point of the whole talk, right?
So you could, if it was just the characters GOTO and like Gattaca, the entire human genome is expressed as GATC, which stands for different things. And so you could do that, GOTO, and they stand for different things. And you could definitely build a Turing tar pit in that. Do not let Dylan hear about this, because he'll build it.
He'll definitely rewatch this. No, he's not going to rewatch the episode.
The point is that there's all these young programmers, and they've never used GoTo, because they haven't used a programming language where you didn't have a choice. But they are aware that somebody at some point wrote a paper. There's no H, Eli. There's no H. Yes, but we just need an H, and we can have Chapel Rowan hot to go. See, that should be Hello World in that language. But no, so they know that somebody, they don't quite know who, and even if they do, they can't pronounce his name, wrote a paper at some point that said GoTo considered harmful. That's all they know. That's all they know. They don't know why. They don't know what the substance of the paper was. They don't know what he was talking about. They don't know what the reaction to it was, which was essentially Algol and eventually C++ and Java and C#. All they know is GoTo considered harmful. So then they're doing a code review, and they see a GoTo, and they just go, "No, you can't use GoTo, it's considered harmful." And you're like, no, it really isn't. It really isn't. So I'm going to do a brown bag where I show the sort of accepted way of doing things, and my code uses GoTo, and I'm going to show them, because I have 2 code samples. One's doing it in a really awful way, and the other is just doing it in like far fewer lines of code with a GoTo statement. Thing is, by the time the optimizing JIT compiler has come along and turned them both into machine code, they're exactly the same, because machine code does not have anything else to do flow control except GoTo. You change the program counter and you continue running.
Basically everything we do in C# is syntactic sugar on top of GoTo.
That's it, totally. It's comparisons and GoTo and mathematical operations. That's everything computers can do right there. You can jump around,
and our human brains suck, and we need something that we can understand, which is why we have languages.
Yes. But no, so if your programming language supports GoTo, and there are nested loops and complex try methods in C# are my 2 things for it. I will occasionally stick it somewhere else. I'd never like to leave a job without leaving at least one GoTo statement in their code.
Do you add a comment? Mark was here.
I don't need to. They go, "Oh God, Mark's edited
Git blame
this."
will take
How
care
do you
of
know
that
there's
for
a
you.
GoTo statement in it? But no, I love it. It's my favorite thing. So yeah, I think my response to that particular comment on the code review was no, it isn't, and resolved. But yes, I might do a brown bag.
Nice.
So yes, you had any good code review comments that stick out?
Good.
Or anyone in the chat?
I think the most fun stuff that I've experienced with code reviews is kind of like the thing that you're doing now, is gotten a comment on stuff that I wrote, which basically made me feel like, hey, we need to have a brown bag or a learning session about this, because I see valid reasons to do it like this. And your comment makes me believe that you see it differently for whatever reason. So let's take some time and explore this idea as a group, and make a decision on how we deal with that kind of situation in the future. Because I'm not always right. I mean, usually I am, but
yeah, usually it's only when you disagree with me that you're wrong.
Well, I could agree with you, but then we would both be wrong. So,
yes, but so no.
But no, I mean, there's. I think that's the best outcome of one of those comments is if you can, as a group, learn and there's times that I learn stuff from juniors like all the time. They grew up in a different time from me, and they learn stuff in college that I didn't grow up with. And I think learning and discussing this stuff together is always the best outcome you can get. It's
Absolutely.
like either I learn or they learn or both of us learn, and learning is always good. It's
yes.
So yeah, I think that's the best outcome you can get out of code review.
So we got a couple of comments in the chat. My favorite /s example of that kind of thing is people that call code they don't like spaghetti code and see nothing wrong with an 8-level stack of function calls to do everything. Yes, but the more function calls you have, the more precise your stack trace. If every function only does one thing and then calls another function, then you don't need the line number, because you just go, well, that function's the one that's broken it. So yes, but thanks for that, Stephen. And Eli, my favorite genre of code review conversations is the type where you inadvertently discover something deeply pathological about the fundamental design of the software. I'm going to have to dive into that with you the next time I see you, Eli, because that sounds interesting. But yes, no, I don't think code reviews are inherently bad. I kind of agree with you that they're not the best way of doing this, but sometimes they're the best option available.
The mechanics by which
doing
we
them
do
right
them
can just make everything so much better. And I think there is something that tooling can do to encourage better behavior in code reviews.
We need better tooling. Yeah,
we do. And how many people do we know who work at GitHub?
At least a bunch, actually.
In our super secret cosmopolitan elite speaker chat, where we secretly give each other the cheat codes to automatically get accepted to No, that's now going to trigger.
Don't talk about that.
No,
that's rule number 1.
All right. So you said you wanted to talk. I've had a thing on the Trello, and it's been there for like months now, and it's just never quite made it in. And then you saw it and went,
is it the cooling thing?
That. It is the cooling thing. So the floor
okay, maybe
systems,
you need to share your screen again.
I'm going to share my screen again, because
this is both cool and disappointing at the same time.
Yes,
there's a company out there called Floor Systems that has a dissolution to the archaic way at which we cool electronics, because they say like everything heat pipes and heat sinks and fans is old technology, and we have developed something better, and it's called airjet, and it's basically a way to move air across the surface without using a fan. That kind of summarizes it, doesn't it?
I think so. So I think it's I mean, these solid state, they're making solid state so many things these days, like solid state LiDAR systems and laser emitters and whatever else. And yeah, they've come up with some way that's probably vaguely quantum to generate air currents without any moving parts, which is brilliant.
And I think their premise is quite accurate. It's like we have these CPUs that can do amazing things, but as soon as we hit thermal throttling, all of that goes away. And we need thermal throttling because otherwise our CPUs would destroy themselves. I mean, that far, their story checks out. I'm not even disputing any of that. But the fact that they have a device that takes only 1 watt of power to move, what was it, 0.2 cubic foot minute, cubic foot per minute of air, that's like a horribly low number. And quite a lot of power to move that air, actually. If you compare that to what a fan does, if we're talking moving air, fans are way more efficient and they move way more air.
Especially those modern ones with the kind of the float ones that float on magnetic bearings and use polarity switching to generate the rotation, which is just also very cool. But no, I mean, I agree. I don't think we're going to be going, oh, let's replace my liquid cooling system with 320 mil fans for a stock AMD chip that isn't even overclocked, because I haven't bothered. But the thing that I think this is very cool for is there are things that you just wouldn't put fans in, like phones and tablets. And with the Snapdragon chips and the M chips, sort of the ARM architecture, so these things are running at much lower wattage generally and generating less heat, but they are still generating heat. And so if you've got something that's relatively inexpensive that you can bang in there that will provide a measurable amount of cooling and allow you to sort of go a little bit longer or a little bit faster without thermal throttling, and then when it does kick in, it's silent. And even if it can't cool enough that it's not going to go, no more thermal throttling ever, but it's, I think there's a market out there for it in the new kind of extreme thin and light devices and stuff.
Because the thing about cooling and cooling down something within the operable range of a processor is, it's all about, we have this thing that generates heat and we have to move that heat into the surroundings of the device without the device getting too hot. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
There's basically two ways of doing that. Either we create a surface that is a lot hotter than the surroundings, which we, especially on a smartphone, don't want. But as long as the temperature difference between the surroundings and the surface is big enough, we can quite efficiently move heat from one into the other. The second way of doing it is we create a lot of surface that is a little bit warmer than the surroundings, which is more desirable, which is basically what a heat sink is. And then we move air through that, right?
Yes.
And part of, like, we've seen cooling systems combine a lot of this. Like we dabbled in the Pentium 4 days. We did a bit of overclocking. So we played with things like liquid nitrogen, and we played with Peltier elements, which is basically like we're using more electricity and more heat to move heat from one side of a plate to the other side of the plate. Yeah. And then you have to deal with more heat on the other side of the plate, but one side of the plate stays a lot cooler.
Yes. The Peltier effect.
So at first, when I saw the 4 systems, like, oh, this is Peltier elements all over again. And then I read more into it. It's like, oh no, this is a way of moving air. And moving air is one of the things, like moving any gaseous or fluid medium over a surface that is warmer is a way to extract the heat from it, which is what a fan on a heatsink does. It's what the water in a water cooling block does. It's all about transferring heat from one medium into the next, right?
Yeah.
And I can see a way where these solid state things, with moving a little bit of air, improve the efficiency enough for something like a processor in a smartphone to get cooled a lot better than they do today. So there is probably a way of applying it, but if we're thinking in terms of smartphones, sacrificing a whole lot of power is not a trivial amount of power.
It's not, but it wouldn't be on all the time. It would be like while you were gaming or something. And if you're doing the things that are sort of pushing the processor up to thermal throttling, you probably don't care that much about battery life. So it's I think it's interesting. What I want to see is somebody create a kind of nano level heatsink for the air to blow through that's attached to the chip, and then that maximizes the surface area that's available for the heat to radiate, and these little air jet things just blow across that. Obviously, that would probably introduce some whistling if you just did it regularly, but get an LLM and say, come up with a configuration of a nano lattice of copper that you could blow air through it and it won't generate any noise. And I'm sure that's a thing that it could do.
And it turns out that surface area is one thing, but another thing that drastically improves heat transfer is turbulence. So I remember in my water cooling days, there was a water block design that was becoming popular in the forums, where you basically had jets that would spray the water downwards in the water block, and it had a pitted surface underneath, and that created a bunch of turbulence above the hotspot of the processor, and that was more efficient than all of the water blocks that were basically a submerged heatsink design. So all of those things are super interesting, but as soon as you want to create turbulence, you again need more space, right? And that's the whole gist of us getting thinner devices. It's like we need ways to get away with the heat.
It's got to go somewhere. Get rid of it. Open a portal to deep space. Although, as I was talking to Dylan last week about this idea of putting data centers in orbit, and it's like, you'd think that would be good for cooling, but then just the first 5 minutes of a physics book will explain to you why it really isn't.
Their idea was we're going to radiate out all the heat, but it's still way easier to transfer it into something that has atoms.
So that is all we've got time for. I just want to go through some of our chat has been having a conversation about methodologies or something, I think, just ignoring us completely, which is totally valid. And so, but yes, it was kind of, so Eli talking about a spectacular failure of the waterfall method in relation to a doomed project. Christopher, we should use the waterfall method for cooling our PCs, and only for that. I'm like, yes, I would do that, like the Timotei adverts from the 1990s, just or the Bounty adverts, where just a bunch of intrepid programmers find their way into a jungle and find a waterfall, and then just sit under there using it to cool their waterproof laptops. But yes. So anyway, that's it for this week. And thank you very much, Hannes, for jumping into Dylan's seat. And
it was a pleasure.
It's been fun chatting with you, and sure we'll do it again at some point. I will be back next week with Dylan, I'm pretty sure, unless something I may have forgotten something, who knows. But we will be back in some form this time next week, hour earlier. I'll just go completely blabbery at this point, shall I? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. And yeah, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time on Tech, Bugs, and Rock and Roll.
Bye-bye.
Play the outro.
Outro?
We have an outro.